You can forgive Bears fans if they thought that 2024 was supposed to be something different, that the playoffs should be a possibility. Because let's be clear, it should have been different, and the playoffs absolutely should have been a possibility. Any revisionist history from the Fields cult or any other segment of Bears fans talk about, oh, 7-10 was kind of the goal. No, you're fucking wrong. No. Like, you had a new face of the franchise quarterback. You'd added several key pieces on the offense. 9th overall pick, Rome Odunze. You traded for Keenan Allen. You brought in DeAndre Swift in free agency. You switched offensive coordinators. Gone was put him up. I'm the offensive coordinator. I got courage. Luke Getsy's the name. Calling great plays. Here's my game. Ugh. And he was replaced by the Wizards' Shane Waldron, who had had some success allegedly in Seattle. And it was another year together with a defense that had seen a lot of investment in that unit. So it was absolutely reasonable to expect a team that was even remotely competently coached could make a run at the playoffs. But never forget the organization that we were talking about. Instead of all of that, we got, you guessed it, a glorious version of the same old Bears football. I mean, this was a season full of Bears football. It didn't start off that way, though, to be fair. 1-2 start, yes, but the Bears were 4-2 heading into the bye week and coming out of the bye in Maryland, not DC, in Maryland. They were up 15-12 at the end of the Commanders game. And then the Hail Maryland happened. And all hell broke loose. Like, it's okay to say, like, hey, you look at the Bears and their first few wins of the season, the first four, it was against the Tennessee Titans, who had the number 1 overall pick, a depleted Rams team, the Panthers, and the Jags. Like, not exactly a murderer's row there at that point, right? But 4-2, still 4-2. And it's not like at that moment that the Commanders were playing so much more awesome football than the Bears were, hence the fact that the Bears were up at the very end of that game until the Fail Mary happened. And it's crazy to me how you can point to one play, one moment, and see that as being the turning point for two separate teams in their season. And it's probably a bit oversimplistic to put it that way, but it feels pretty accurate, right? The Bears went on to lose 10 games in a row. The Commanders went on behind rookie Jaden Daniels at quarterback to play in the NFC Championship game. The Bears, after that bad loss to Washington, you're like, okay, let's see how they respond for Matt Eberflus. They face-planted against the Cardinals. Even worse, they face-planted against the Patriots, who you knew were going to suck in 2024. Then you have a string of 3 straight divisional losses by 3 points or less. In that time, Shane Waldron's fired. And then you've got the embarrassment that was the Thanksgiving game against Detroit, where the head coach can't think of fucking calling a timeout so you don't let the damn clock run out. It was so bad in 2024 that the Chicago Bears, for the first time in their over a 100-year history, fired a head coach during the season. Wild shit. A season that could have been so encouraging on so many different levels ended up in one respect being an unmitigated disaster of a 5-12 season. Although on the flip side, you could say they did beat the Packers last week of the season, and this season was so bad it led to Matt Eberflus getting fired and was the impetus for this organization to go after a big-name, offensive-minded head coach. Fair, right? Give, take here a little bit. But ultimately, the most important thing about this season for the Bears was Caleb Williams and his development and what he showed. And it was a mixed bag, but there were certainly some reasons for optimism. He did start all 17 games. You know, Justin Fields could never. Completed 62% of his passes. Yes, that's true. But so many times he just missed easy throws. His downfield accuracy at many points was absolute dog shit. He did throw for over 3,500 passing yards, but as some will say, like, a number of those yards came in like garbage time type of situations. That is also true. but he had 20 touchdown passes to only 6 interceptions. And in fact, he had one stretch during the season, which probably isn't that great when you talk about a rookie starting quarterback, to where he was like the sixth or seventh most consecutive passes without an interception as a quarterback in NFL history. You actually want your rookie quarterback to make some mistakes because that's how they learn. So yeah, it's fair to point out that some of the numbers came in garbage time. They absolutely did. But the low turnover rate's pretty impressive overall. And it's also fair to point out, if we're going to point out one thing, let's play devil's advocate in reverse. Caleb led several clutch drives that gave the Bears a chance to win games. And just because they faltered in so many of those spots, that's not necessarily on Caleb. All in all, not too bad of a season considering he was stuck behind a really bad offensive line. And anybody that's going to sit there and try to say, oh, Braxton Jones isn't so bad, don't let the analytics fool you. You know what your fucking eye saw this year. He stunk. Maybe not as bad as the interior of that O-line, but that line in general outside of Darnell Wright was pretty doo-doo, folks. Let's be real here. The biggest surprise to me was that Ryan Poles was retained. Like, how could you justify this? He was the one that constructed the underperforming roster. He's the one that hired the crap coaching staff. He's the one that didn't improve the offensive line in front of Caleb Williams, knowing the play style of Caleb Williams was going to necessitate needing a better offensive line. He is 15-37 through 3 seasons as the Bears general manager, and somehow you're going to allow him to be involved with the next head coaching hire. It's just stunning. Just absolutely stunning, but yet here we are. And for months, Bears fans, even as the season was going on, the smart ones, the real ones, knew that, bringing back Matt Eberflus was a dumbass decision to begin with. If you're going to go with Caleb Williams, then you need to bring in a new coach and you need to reset the clock. You need to get everybody in the organization on the same timeline. Of course, the Bears are fucking dumb because that's what Bears football is all about. So they did the same shit that they did with Rex Grossman, the same shit that they did with Mitchell Trubisky, the same shit that they did with Justin Fields. Lame duck coach. Unfucking believable. But here we are. But for months, many Bears fans were pining for Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, and for good reason. You never know at the end of the day, but you have certain guys you look at and you feel pretty confident that they could be really good as head coaches at the NFL level. And the Bears got them. That's crazy, right? And while that's great and all, and it is certainly worth celebrating, let's be clear here. The work is just beginning. The staff is being rounded out. Dennis Allen was hired to be the defensive coordinator. I like this hire because he's at least equivalent to Eberflus as a D coordinator, maybe slightly better. And when I say slightly, not a ton, but you look at Dennis Allen. He's been a head coach a couple times in the NFL. Hard to envision a bunch of teams beating down the door for him. So if Dennis Allen comes in and he does a good job with this defense, he's likely to be there for a few years, gives you stability on the other side of the ball, which allows Ben Johnson to focus on the side of the ball. That's his strength that he needs to really focus on. Love that, right? But Ben Johnson, if 2024 is what it took to bring in the right offensive mind, to work with Caleb Williams, so be it. He should have been the guy brought in to start 2024, but here we are. But when you look back at the season, what went wrong? Obviously, there's so many different things. You hired an offensive coordinator, but never bothered to ask yourself, why didn't the team that he had just finished working for as an offensive coordinator even bother interviewing him for their head coaching job? Gee, I wonder if that could be an indication of something. Gee, why? Such an important question to ask sometimes. Why? Obviously, that was wrong. Matt Eberflus as a head coach is a fucking idiot. Worst head coach in Bears organization history. Argue with the wall. But another big reason, obviously, for the failure of this team were their struggles on the offensive line, but honestly in the defensive line, too. The offensive line was really bad, but that defensive line certainly wasn't great. And they got worse, especially as the season went along. You had injuries to Andrew Billings. Not a great unit on either side of the ball. And when you look at teams like the Eagles that just won the Super Bowl, and you saw the strength of their team were the offensive and defensive lines, and you saw the Chiefs, who were solid on the defensive line but kind of struggled in the Super Bowl on the offensive line, you see where the game was won and lost. You just can't be as pedestrian there as the Bears have been the past few years, which is especially crazy when everybody talks about Bears football. And the last couple of times that the Bears have been really competent, really contenders. The mid-'80s, they had an elite defensive and offensive line. 2006, they had a really damn good offensive line, a really damn good defensive line. The points that you sit there and look at and you point to as an organization and say, we want to clutch to that and mimic that style of ball. You don't even mimic that style of fucking ball. Unbelievable. But now we're here in the offseason. You got a few weeks until free agency starts up, and the Bears currently have about $65 million in cap space, give or take, and they can get aggressive here and create some additional cap space, like releasing Gerald Everett would save them $5 million. That feels like that's a no-brainer. DeMarcus Walker's probably 50-50, but if you release him, you save about $5.3 million. You know, that's quite a bit of cap space to tie up into a guy that doesn't produce very much, frankly, was never really a great fit in Eberflus's system, so that was such a dumb signing. Ironically, he might fit a little bit better into Dennis Allen's defensive system. If you want to move on from Kevin Byard, you save about $7 million, but you may not feel the pressure to. They may want to try and continue to justify the money that was given to Troy Edmonds, but at this point to me, you should cut fucking bait, save about $4 million, release Ryan Bates. Ryan Poles' multiple-year obsession with getting him crapped out, save yourself $4 million there. So there's a chance with the $65 million they have in cap space that if they want to, they can get to $75 or $80 million pretty quickly. But they've also got some key decisions to make with current and upcoming free agents. You look at current free agents like Keenan Allen, Tevin Jenkins, and Coleman Shelton. They're all free agents. I don't see any reason to bring back any of the three of them. I really don't. You know, Keenan Allen had some moments as you got into the second half of the season. He was kind of healthy. He started to produce more, but like the amount of money you have to tie into him, you're not going to get the payoff in terms of production. And frankly, he's not giving you the type of thing that you need out of that third wide receiver in this offense, which is some vertical threat. He's got to go. Tevin Jenkins, yeah, good when he's healthy, but that's a really big fucking if, and you just can't see yourself investing huge money in him. It's just reckless at this point. Like, he's not only missing games, he's getting into games to start, and then he's out by like the first or second quarter. You can't fucking do that. And Coleman Shelton, the analytics will tell you he was solid to above average. He fucking wasn't. How many times you saw he can get his shit pushed in? He was bad this year. A good example of where analytics try to lie to you with what your eyes freaking see. On the defensive side of the ball, your most notable free agents are Darrell Taylor and Jack Sanborn, who's a restricted free agent. You could bring both of those guys back if you want, especially Sanborn. But they probably got some decisions to make, too, in terms of Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, and Braxton Jones. They'll be entering year 4, contract extension eligible. Do you want to get out in front of any of these guys before they potentially hit the market next year? I would say probably the one you want to focus on trying to get done now is Kyler Gordon. Because when he's healthy, he is a presence as your kind of nickel slot corner. Brisker, I need to see more out of him. I need to see him healthy on the field before you even entertain it. And frankly, Braxton Jones, like, do you really want to tie like double-digit million a year into this guy? Do you really? I don't know about that, man. But here's the thing. When you look at this Bears team, you got a ton of offseason needs, which is really disappointing. We talk about the haul and we talk about the cap space they've had the past couple of years. How the fuck do you go into an offseason with so many damn needs on your roster? Like, that to me is yet another reason why Ryan Poles should have been fired. The ironic thing is now that he was allowed to stay, he probably saved his ass for a few years by hiring Ben Johnson. So things I've said about Ryan Poles in 2024 won't look as good in 2025, 2026, but that's in part because Kevin Warren should have never brought him back, but he allowed him to come back when he didn't deserve it, frankly. But here's what we know. Free agency, this team has to go all in on the trenches. Point blank, period. That is offensive and defensive line. And when you look at the guard class, like, assuming most of these guys hit the market, it's a solid class. You should be able to get 2 starters here, and they need to. Whether it's Trey Smith, Mekhi Becton, Kevin Zeitler, Will Freese, Zach Martin, James Daniels, Will Hernandez. Out of that group, you should be able to find 2 starters. I didn't even list everybody, like Aaron Banks and so forth. You know, if you told me, like, hey, Trey Smith, Kevin Zeitler, okay. If you tell me it's Mekhi Becton and Zeitler or Hernandez, fine, whatever. Most of these guys play right. I don't give a fuck if they played right guard mostly or not. Like, you need to sign 2 of these guys. And to those Bears fans that might say, you got to build your offensive line through the draft. Yes, but you can't necessarily do that all in one draft. So ding dong, dumb dicks, guess what that fucking means? You're going to have to supplement right now by spending some big money in free agency on the goddamn trenches. You worry about building through the draft out of the offensive line over the past couple of years, but you need somebody now. You can't wait a year or fucking two. Do you understand what they're saying? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? And then whether it's Drew Dahlman, who's probably the preference, or Ryan Kelly, you got to sign one of those two guys at center. If they are serious about bringing back Coleman Shelton and trying to tell the fan base that he's better than either one of those two guys, that's fucking clown school shit. No. You need 3 new starters on the offensive line in the interior, point blank period. You really need a 4th at left tackle, but that's a different conversation. But when you look at the free agent pool, there is some depth there at guard. There is a little bit of talent there at center. You got to get a center. You got to get 2 guards, and you figure it out fucking later. In terms of the defensive line, whether you go after a defensive tackle like Milton Williams, although he's probably going to be a bit on the high side, Levi Onwuzurike from the Lions, you could potentially see that happening, giving you some depth on the interior of that D-line. Defensive end, you certainly have some options. Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick will all stand out, although I think somebody like a Chase Young or Marcus Davenport with their familiarity and fit in Dennis Allen's system might make more sense here. You probably got to address like at least one rotational defensive tackle and one starter level defensive end here. And the whole reason for this is the Bears have to be aggressive in free agency, not the pathetic polls crap we've seen the last 3 years. Like, you have to really get after it in this free agency period because you have to go all in on the trenches, because what that does is it frees you up and it enables you in the first 3 rounds of this upcoming NFL draft in April. It allows you to swing for the fences and go for the best player available and not be so focused on position of need. And what that means is if you think an elite left tackle or an elite edge rusher or an elite 3 technique tackle is available at 10, then you take them without hesitation. If you think a speed wide receiver changes your offense and you're looking at him in round 2, then you take him. If you think a running back in round 2 or round 3 is a real offense changer, then you fucking take him. If you rightfully feel that middle linebacker is a big position of need on this defense, then on day 2 somewhere you take them. If you feel like a Pro Bowl level safety is available on day 2, you take them. Again, my point is you have to sit there in free agency and go aggressively, strongly, passionately after the trenches on both sides of the ball. Outbid and overpay if you must, because that is what the situation and circumstances command and demand at this point, because then it will free you up and create options in the draft. Because what you got to get out of this draft is you got to get impact players. You got to get difference makers. You got to get long-term stars. Point blank. Like, this has to be a pivotal draft for you. All right? Has to be a pivotal draft. With a new head coach in the wings, Caleb Williams coming into year 2, you got to get this offseason right. It's more critical than even arguably the past couple of off seasons. But the spending in the trenches frees you up in the draft where you can do whatever the fuck you want. And that's a position you want to be in. If Ryan Poles sits there and says, half-asses in a free agency, signs 1 guard, but then brings Tevin Jenkins back on a 1-year prove-it deal and re-signs Coleman Shelton to a 2 or 3 year deal, then you realize he's just as bad at evaluating the offensive line as you fucking imagine. Your hope has to be that Ben Johnson comes in and tells him, hey, respectfully, your offensive line fucking sucks and this is not going to work with my system and I need some dogs up in front. I need some big fat asses, and that's what they need. They need the Trey Smiths, the Mekhi Bectons. They need fat asses on the interior of that offensive line. And they need a defensive line that can get after the fucking quarterback. Because they don't have that right now. They need a defensive line that can hold up better if Billings gets injured again against the run, and they don't have that right now. You have to build that foundation. If that means you go heavy in free agency on both the trenches on both sides of the ball, and then you go heavy in the draft on the trenches on both sides of the ball, that's fucking fine. Do what you want at that point. But as critical as the draft is, this offseason, it is more critical for the Bears to get the free agency cycle right, in my opinion, because that enables them to do what they should do in the draft, which is swing for the fucking fences. Don't worry about positions. Don't worry about this or that. You're going after the home run players. That's what it's all about. So again, it was a disappointing Bears football kind of season for the Bears. We're so used to it now, but maybe, just maybe, the times, they could be a change.